Hey everybody, welcome to the Blendr Report, where news meets rational thinking. I'm your host, Jonathan Harvey. This is your co-host, Liam DeBoer. Liam, what are we talking about today?
Today, we're chatting about the standoff between Trump and Ford, the tariff ad that sparked a trade meltdown, Mark Carney's Brookfield accused of dodging $6.5 billion in taxes, and the Great Feminization, how social engineering rewired our institutions. All right, let's get started. So first off, we've got Trump versus Ford, the tariff ad that sparked a trade meltdown. Ontario Premier Doug Ford lit a match under U.S.-Canada relations this week with an ad quoting Ronald Reagan's warning that tariffs hurt every American worker. The ad aired during the World Series, angering President Donald Trump, who accused Canada of meddling in U.S. politics and twisting Reagan's words. In retaliation, Trump halted trade talks and threatened a 10% tariff hike on Canadian imports. Ford has stated he'll pause the ad, but the damage may already be done. Ottawa is now scrambling to calm tensions as Ontario's manufacturing sector braces for impact. What began as a clever jab at protectionism has spiraled into a diplomatic firestorm, one that could cost Canadian workers dearly. The feud underscores how fragile North American trade has become when politics and ego collide. So is this feud mostly about trade or pride?
Ultimately, I think it's about both, right? So I think the foundational argument is trade, but the way that it's being handled is two egotistical boys dick swinging with whatever tools they have, right? That's really what's happening. But there's some things to consider here. I don't like how anybody's behaving. I don't like how Trump's behaving. I don't really like how Ford's behaving. Now, if I pare back the attitude and I kind of go, okay, what makes sense though, objectively, maybe from a more economic perspective? A lot of people are very upset with how Trump is handling these tariffs. I'm not necessarily sure that it's the wrong thing for America. It might be the right move. Maybe not the way he's doing it. Maybe not to the degree that he's doing it and the volume and how he's weaponizing them. Okay, cool. But if you want to reshore manufacturing, if you want to, and production and sort of try to rebuild the American economy, I don't think it's the worst idea. Again, it's nuanced and complex. So what I'm saying there is like, I understand the need or the use for them from Trump's perspective. His strategies hasn't been great. But then, so the reason I'm saying that is I can understand sort of the interest in America first. You can see how America has definitely lost a lot, in how they fund some of these global organizations, how a lot of their, you hear what Trump says, like a lot of globalization has taken a lot of manufacturing production away from America, taken a lot of money out of their pockets. Like, okay, I see that point. Is his silver bullet solution with tariffs going to work? Probably not 100%. It's not going to solve all of their problems, but he had to do something radical because the country's like, they're burning through $1 trillion in new debt like every few months right now. You got to do something dramatic to try to correct course. I don't know enough to think of a better solution than to try to start in the position of tariffs. So I don't have a big problem with it, to be quite honest with you. Now, when you look at it from Canada's perspective, they did have an opportunity to create a trade deal with him. Instead, what they did was they used it as leverage to win another election here. That's what the Liberals did. Instead of being like, okay, let's sit down and hash this out. Like, obviously, you're reworking the trade deals with everybody around the world. Everyone's pretty much come to terms except for Canada and China, right? So we had an opportunity. Sure, things were going to be a little tougher at home. But if you look at how things were over the last, I don't know how many decades, you could argue that America was kind of getting the short end of the stick on this deal. Okay. So go sit down and figure it out. But the Liberals use it as sort of this divisive tactic to make sure they won another election. And it worked for them. Great. Power and profit over the people. I get it. What I don't get is why a premier of Ontario is getting involved at this degree, to this level. It's not even his job. This is between federal governments. So for him to be in this, like, yes, it's hurting Ontario, but he should be lobbying with the federal government to then go make a deal with Trump so that Canada's in a better position. Taking our tax dollars from Ontario and then weaponizing them against the Republican Party down there is pure ego. It's pure stupidity. Yes, the foundation is still tariffs, but it's just all ego. I can't even believe he did it. Like before it really popped off, like a week and a half ago when I saw this, I wrote a short article and I was just like, this is the dumbest thing I've ever seen. Then it got sort of, international attention. But now you've got two guys with big egos that are just going to keep going at each other. And if you look at the situation, I don't see how Canada comes out on the positive side of things here in any way, right? Because They've nuked all trade negotiations for right now. They just increased the tariffs by another 10% on Canada because they continued to run that ad last night again at the baseball game. So I don't see what tools we have in our belt to mitigate this. I think we're in trouble.
Yeah. And to me, whether who's in the right or wrong, that doesn't really matter to me as much as I'm just trying to figure out, what's going on here. And so I think the tariff play is, yes, it's an economic thing as well. But okay, if you know that conflict is rising around the world and there is a real possibility of a world war.
Yes.
Now, I'm not saying that I think Trump is trying to stoke that, but if that is on the horizon, then you need to have a manufacturing base because you cannot rely on other countries and nations in that time. Maybe some certain allies and stuff like that. It was a lot of America's industrial base that fueled the Allies' World War II efforts. There's a really good saying that World War II was won with British intelligence, American steel, and Russian blood. So if you know that this is potentially on the horizon, then you want to start bringing that back so that, we talk about it being cars and all of this kind of stuff right now. But hey, if shit really pops off, we're going to need these factories rolling out tanks and military vehicles.
That's what they did last time.
Right.
100%.
And so I think that he's trying to, now this is just, again, I don't have any, internal details or anything that's pointing me towards this, just kind of a sense as to how these kind of things operate over time. But so I think that's a major play here. And also what's happening in that same aspect of him trying to bring manufacturing back is also him trying to get countries to bend the knee, essentially pull countries into alliances, force their hands. There's no fence sitting anymore. Like, are you going to be on the side of the
East
West?
or West? The lines are deep. Let's go. Yeah.
And I'm gonna cut that line and see who's on which side. And I think, we've shown we were the only initial retaliatory tariffs.
Yes.
It was us and China. And so it's like, okay, are you guys going to keep playing this globalism game where nations get stomped on, in which, all the globalists even say themselves that like China is the model. This is the way forward. So are we going to have some like socialist globalist governance, or are we going to actually worry about our independent nations again? And so I think that there's this much bigger thing at play here than most people are thinking about when it comes to the tariffs and the economic wars and all of this kind of stuff. And so in that scenario, if you just think about the psychology of these kind of things, right? It's like, okay, if you have, whether it's a business deal, whether it's nation to nation, anything, it's like, if you don't have leverage, I'm not going to even act as if you have an equal say at this table. And so I think that's a lot of what this bullying is, in which I can agree comes off very, very brash and not definitely not, what we would consider typically as statesman-like. But at the same time, I think it's very foolish to know that you've got a guy who's got all the cards on the table, other than China. China's the only one that really, as far as like a singular nation that holds similar cards, if not maybe more than America. But you've got the guy with all the marbles saying, hey, like, pipe down. And you think you're, as the Ontario premier with literally zero cards.
Yes.
You're sitting here going, I'm going to boast my chest. It's like, what do you think is going to happen? Because think about it like a prison yard. If you've got the toughest guy on the yard and he allows the weakest person to come up and start mouthing off to him in the middle of the yard, he's like, I need everybody else in this yard to know that this is not okay.
Yes.
And so that's the signal being sent. And it's like, if you can't understand, now I'm not saying that you should just cower, but you have to understand that these are really the play that's going on, and you need to outsmart them. You're not going to outmuscle them.
100%. But that's exactly what I'm seeing. Is it's just pure ego. It's just pure stupidity. The fact that he even thought he should throw a dime of our tax dollars at it when it's not even his role, to me, is the most ridiculous thing. And now EB's saying the same thing, like, oh, we're going to do it too. Guys, sit down and shut up. Go lobby with the federal government, get them to put a deal in place. Because the thing is, the further you go, now you have to, it's a further trip back to get him to the table. So now what do you have to give up? Now what do you have to say? Now what do you have to do? Because now he's in this position where Carney, I don't know how Carney repairs this right now in any real way, unless he's like, oh, just take our oil. Like, what are you going to do? What does your deal look like? I mean, maybe I'm not going to, maybe dark horse is the wrong idea, but maybe, and this is just, this is sort of a thinking about it from like a 4D chess move, which I don't think Ford would understand. So if this is the case, then I would say that he was manipulated into doing this. Mm-hmm. If for some reason the federal government of Canada would like to be deeper into bed with China rather than the United States and can't convince the people of Canada that that's the right move, then you get a pawn like Ford to throw $75 million at an ad that is going to do nothing but piss off Trump. Because even someone like wearing a helmet just for their own safety, because they're that stupid, would have known what was going to happen here.
That's interesting, because then you don't have to sell it and be like, this is why we're going to... It's just like, we have no other choice.
Yeah, exactly. We're handcuffed. Yeah. Trump is not giving us an opportunity to get back to the table. We have to align ourselves with, kind of this more Euro-China and China kind of alliance thing. And we can't. Well, maybe we'll figure something out down the road with the U.S., but this is where the better deal is. And you and I talk a lot how deeply infiltrated China is in our country. And, if I'm China and I'm pulling some strings, now this move starts to make a bit of sense. Again, this is completely theoretical. I have no idea. I'm just sitting here going, how could they be this stupid? Are they this stupid? Or is this just now the story they get to say? Well, Trump's bad. He wants to make us the 51st state. And, he won't trade with us any increased tariffs. Again, we have no choice. He's the bad guy. Back to the old guy I talked to on the street the other day. What's the mainstream media saying about this?
Right.
So that I don't know. Again, that could be the play from the federal government's perspective. I don't know.
Yeah, and I think too when we talk about incompetence or malice, a lot of people think they're mutually exclusive. It's like no. These people can have very bad intentions or self-serving intentions at the very least, and also be dumb.
Yeah, well, yeah. You serve both things. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Like you convince Ford he's going to be the hero, but you're using him as from the federal government's perspective, especially considering he's a conservative leader. Like it's the perfect move.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't seem like some liberal Fed plan. It seems like, well, he's a conservative premier. He's been elected multiple times. I mean, he's, so it's, when you look at it from political lines too, you can tell a pretty good story there now if you're the liberal government. If you're Carney, you've got your story set.
And too, I mean, you see, especially we know this, right, with Ford and Polyev, that he's definitely, at least when it comes to political, he hasn't outright said it, but it's definitely looked like he's been trying to position himself as the federal leader of the conservatives.
No, he is. I know enough people, and I have enough inside information from people that's their plan.
Yeah,
that's what they're doing. They saw a point where they thought they could basically make a maneuver around him, and that's why you push back on that last election.
So I also wonder if this is some of that, of the ego of just being like, all right, fine, I'm going to be the guy that stands up and make the claim and show as to why I need to, but then it just backfires maybe too.
Yeah,
it could be, it's not even that, let's say the federal government or anyone came across and said, hey, like, we think you should run this ad, but it could also just be that he's dumb enough to think that he holds enough cards to take on Trump and be this guy that makes a bold stand.
Last time, what did he try to do? He tried to increase the tariffs on energy coming out of Ontario. How quickly did he put his tail between his legs and turn back the other way? Like literally less than 24 hours.
Yeah.
So he knows exactly what was going to happen. So I think this is, I mean, again, we'll see how this all shakes out, but just putting it out there.
All right, moving on to our next story. We've got Mark Carney's Brookfield accused of dodging $6.5 billion in taxes. A revelation in Parliament this week has pulled Mark Carney's quote-unquote former firm, Brookfield Asset Management, into the light, not for its investments, but for its missing taxes. Testimony before the Ethics Committee confirmed Brookfield paid $6.5 billion less than it would have under Canada's standard corporate rate between 2017 and 2021. The data came from Canadians for Tax Fairness and the Toronto Star, which found Brookfield had the largest tax gap in the country. While there can be lawful reasons for paying less, an expert told MPs this was a major underpayment that should have financed public services. The irony is rich. Carney built his career preaching fiscal prudence while leading a firm that dodged it. Ottawa raises taxes on working Canadians, then turns a blind eye as insiders avoid them. Brookfield's tax gap isn't just a number, it's proof of a system rigged to reward those who write the rules. So why are ordinary Canadians audited for a few $100s while billion-dollar firms skate free?
Well, you kind of said the answer. The system's rigged to reward those who write the rules.
Mm-hmm.
You can't separate corporate elite and political elite. You can't. They're one and the same. And they switch sides. They go in and out. It's like you look at people in the United States that are the head of the FDA. Now they're all some sort of advisor or head of something for Pfizer or Moderna or some other medical pharma company, right? They just change positions. You pay your dues and you jump back out. Whereas Carney's literally from this company. Literally the company he came from was the one we're talking about that dodged all the taxes. Now it's his turn to run the political show. So he's in there. He's going to do his thing, make sure everybody still gets paid, then hop back out. Then someone else is going to jump in. So this whole thing's calculated and orchestrated. You can't run big business internationally at this scale with these kinds of shareholders and the people that are the amount of power that these people have. They know they can't just have some random Wild West prime minister or president in place where they can do whatever they want to shake things up. That's what's so unique about the US, right? Because that is what Trump is doing. He's really disturbing the status quo in the corporate world, right? But here, we're under a lot more control here, like most of the West. I think most of the East as well. I think most of the world. I think you have to get outside of first world nations really to see where places are a little more Wild West, for lack of a better term. So what you're seeing here is just the system at play, right? They put these rules in place. They get to keep their money. And you ask why are Canadians audited for a few $100s? Well, it's all about control. You can't have people running around making money and not paying taxes on it because then you don't have control over your citizens and your people. And if you think about this, I was talking about this with someone the other day. You and I look at a lot of things that oppress Canadians, whatever. And we think about it in terms of freedom, primarily. Because realistically, I just want the world to be a meritocracy where you can try to go make your way. But the thing is, they put all these things in place that stop you from actually being able to get there. And now if you think about it from our perspective, you look at Bill C, you look at all the online streaming act, online news act, you look at the Bill C9, C8, the ones, the internet killer, the online harms bill that's coming back. You look at all these things. And so that's a very strong censorship apparatus. So that stops you from expressing yourself. So it's a control mechanism essentially, but also from our perspective, it also hurts our business, right? So there's a lot of these little things that are worked, they're permeated through society. There's policy and legislation, no matter where you look, there's policy and legislation that is kind of holding us down, right? But a lot of that is secondary to the big one, economics. If they control you economically, that's really how you control your citizens. If we have to work until past mid-year to actually be able to, for our tax freedom day, to actually make money for ourselves, what does that tell you? It tells you you're under complete control by your government. More than half your money is going to this bacteria that is just draining society, right? But the thing is, they give you the sort of illusion of choice, and then you're under complete economic control. So that's why they have to continue to audit people for a few $100s. That's why they have to keep. If they don't have economic control over mass society, they don't have control over anything. Because all the other things we can kind of work around, but economics you just can't.
Yeah, and when it comes to this as well, I actually don't even have that big of an issue with the fact that you're using offshore tax havens and stuff. And obviously, as the article is pointing this out, a lot of this is probably done even legally. But the issue for me is that it's the same people that are then raising the taxes on ordinary Canadians that don't have the luxury of being able to offshore their money. And so, I mean, we've even seen it. The Fraser Institute did a study on the effective tax rate, so balancing what people pay in versus what they get out. Yeah, and then they found that Canadians making $30,000 to $60,000 get hit the hardest. And you go, that's the group you say everything is for. And so if they're getting hit the hardest, then this is where I have an issue because. Yeah, you can't sit here and say, Carney just said this like a week or two ago. He said Canadians need to pay their fair share. You can't say that. You can't tell the average Canadian they need to make more sacrifices when you haven't been making those sacrifices.
Oh, I agree.
And this just goes to like a fundamental aspect of leadership. And, I've places I've managed before and all of this kind of stuff, I know that there's probably a few people that, feel like I was a little, I would never like have outbursts or like really like lay into people, but I had rules and I would constantly let people know if they were not meeting those standards. But never would you see me cut short on one of those standards.
Right.
It was in my mind every single day where I'm like, I cannot ask people to do these things if I'm not doing them myself.
Yeah, you're not hypocritical.
That's this entire governance system.
Yes.
It's like, what are you talking about? Even you look at, this is something I just started digging into yesterday after somebody kind of sent me a tip on it. But so I got to dive deeper even yet. But dude, all of the public pension funds do the same thing. They all offshore money.
Yeah, 100%.
So you take our taxes, and then the public fund or the public sector people take our taxes, offshore them so they can bolster their future pensions.
Yes.
And you go, sorry? Like, if you are relying on our taxes, you do not get to skirt the tax system.
Yeah, it's exactly how it works, man. This is the problem you have, is it's completely hypocritical, but then you go back to how this whole thing is controlled. They go, well, it's in a blind trust. So then you ask any liberal and any boomer, pretty much any boomer. I know some are listening to us; they don't see it the same way. But the majority of boomers and anybody who's a liberal, and they go, it's in a blind trust. He doesn't have any idea what's going on. It's completely above board. That's not him. He didn't do, like, they'll find some way to do mental gymnastics, or they don't have any information because of what they're fed through the media. You know what I mean? So it's either the media manipulates, or they put in some soft rule like, oh, it's a blind trust. Give me a break. The two people that are tapped into what's going on are close to Carney, and he's got no idea what's happening. Come on. Plus, he knows exactly what he already owned.
It is crazy the cognitive dissonance some of these people can display. Like, I saw when we made a post about this, posted this story on our socials. I saw a couple. Now, I really struggle with this because knowing how much of the internet is bots, I go, is this just like a liberal party bot farm? I'm sure the Conservative Party also has bots of their own, or at least pays firms to, or whatever. But anyways, I saw this response to that post about Carney or Brookfield skipping out on $6.5 billion in taxes. And somebody was like, "Well, it was all legal, and at least you need to learn the difference between tax evasion and tax avoidance, and all of this kind of stuff." And so they're like lecturing me for essentially taking an issue with this, and I'm thinking, you guys are the ones that run around talking about tax the billionaires all the time.
Yes.
Like, constantly being like, oh, corporations are out of control. They're not paying their fair share and this and that. And then on a dime, when they're wearing a freaking liberal sweater, you're like,
you spin.
Yeah. Hey, no. Learn the difference between, you're just like, what?
Well, this is the problem, right? This is what I find with politics. And this is, I have to give the political parties and the media a lot of credit for, is logic is up here. You operate in a position of logic with your brain. You usually find the right answer if you're intelligent enough, and you push a lot of things that are emotional to the side. You just get to the core. You're objective. And then you get to the emotional part of your brain, which is below it. And the reality is, in the political sphere, they've managed to get the large majority of society to live in the emotional part of their mind when it comes to politics. They over associate. It's like a sports team. They just become so aligned, and their identity becomes so hardened in being a part of this political party that they don't use logic anymore. It's just all emotion. It's actually pretty impressive what they've done. So that's what happens. People just get into this headspace of, I'm going to do mental gymnastics because this is my team. I'm going to throw logic out the window, and I'm going to find a way to continue believing what I believe because I don't want to challenge my own set of beliefs or challenge my own identity. This is where this comes from.
Yeah, for sure. Actually, there was a German political theorist in the who was born in the late 1800s, and his name is Carl Schmitt, and he came up with the friend-enemy distinction, which was the foundational concept in his political theory, asserting that the essence of the political lies in the division between friend and enemy. This distinction is existential and public, not private or personal, arising when two collective groups confront each other with the potential for violent conflict. So he's just saying this politics game is just finding friends and enemies. That's it.
Yes.
And there's no gray zone there. Like, if somebody is labeled an enemy, destroy them. If somebody's on a friend,
Defend,
destroy your enemies
yeah,
with.
right.
But like you can see this like crazy where, okay, so you see liberal people in Canada, like Liberal Party members and voters, switching on a dime when it comes to taxes and such when it's Carney doing it. But then even too, we saw this crazy example of this down in the States recently. Did you see that Democratic senator that was running who was found to have Nazi symbols tattooed on him?
Yes.
And then I saw a very prominent left-wing commentator say, I'd rather because the Republican candidate they were running against was I guess, pro-Israel. And so she said, how did she say it? She said, I'd rather vote for somebody that has a Nazi symbol tattooed on them than somebody who has steadfastly supported a genocide. And you go, well, okay, those two things, wait, if somebody's a Nazi, then whatever. But then you scroll back, 6 months or so, and you see them losing their freaking mind over the Elon Musk like fake salute, essentially.
Of course.
And that is the friend-enemy distinction in play, where there's zero principle, there's zero logic, there's zero rationale. It's just, are you on my team? If so, yay, I'll support anything you do. If you're on another team, I'm trying to destroy you.
Yeah, I mean, I'll cap off by saying this. Given where the majority of people operate from when working in this space, I just don't see how we correct course at scale. I don't know how we can do it.
It's just, it's an if thing. Like, I think people imagine that you come across and you put a policy in place that corrects course. It's like, if you just look at the pendulum of history, it swings, it's constantly swinging. It never solidifies. And so I think it's inevitable that it's going to change course, but it's just, when and how long does that take? I
mean, foundationally, the individuals. I mean, like getting people to actually operate from a position of, let's be logical now. Like, it's such a crux of the political space that I don't think people at scale will ever just use logic the way we do, which is nice. I mean, the people that are listening to us, the things that we say, there is a reasonable number of us that do this. But again, I think by and large, I would say large majority just don't do it. And until you do, it's very hard to actually find compromise and balance. But anyway.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's the Orwellian doublethink idea, right? Like holding two contradictory beliefs in believing them to be true.
Yeah.
And I think we all have that to some degree, but are you willing to part ways with those contradictory beliefs once you realize that?
Yes.
But then the people that I think have, solidified in their mind, they're like, no, I operate in this space now. This is me.
Yes.
Then, I don't have much faith that those people are ever coming back.
Today's podcast is brought to you by All Day Coffee. Do you love your coffee but overdo it sometimes? Get the jitters, a little anxiety, or have sleepless nights if you sneak in a cup just a little too late? Well, I do. That's why we're excited to partner with All Day Coffee, a specialty roaster started by good friends of ours. They make great coffee with different caffeine levels. They have decaf, quarter calf, half calf, or full calf. That means you can still enjoy your morning cup, an afternoon pick-me-up, or an evening brew without the shakes or the crash. Personally, I've switched to half calf and it's been a game changer for me. For a limited time, all new customers get 20% off and free shipping by using the code WELCOME20. That's WELCOME20. Try it now at alldaycoffee.co and see why I made the switch.
For our last story of the day, the Great Feminization, How Social Engineering Rewired Our Institutions. Helen Andrews wrote an essay that argues what we call wokeness isn't new ideology at all, but the result of a deeper social shift. The Great Feminization of our institutions. From law to journalism, medicine to academia, women now make up the majority in many of society's most powerful fields. This didn't happen by nature. It was planned through decades of government and corporate policy that rewarded gender balance over merit. Law schools became majority female in 2016, medical schools in 2019, and newsrooms like the New York Times shortly after. Each milestone coincided with the spread of wokeness across the West. Andrews argues that anti-discrimination laws and HR mandates made it impossible for women to lose. The result is a culture that values empathy over excellence and consensus over truth. The goal was equality. The outcome is fragility, a system that confuses compassion with competence. So have empathy and inclusivity quietly replaced logic and skill as the new virtues.
It seems that way, right? It seems like we live in a place where, to our previous conversation, logic really doesn't rule the day anymore. And we live in a world where DEI seems to have taken over merit, right? It's where do you fit sort of in terms of diversity, equity, and inclusion? How many victim points do you have? And what's interesting is I don't even know who we are, but we allow this group to sort of build this framework of DEI and who's more important and who's not. And it's interesting because it's like they control enough of the cultural zeitgeist to just kind of drop in their ideas, and then they just take a foothold. I don't know how they do it, but it's how it works. So there's all these things that you kind of stack points, and then from that point forward, it's like those are the people that are prioritized without any real merit. This is very, very clear. And don't get me wrong, I think that there's a problem with equality of opportunity in the world. Not outcome. That's an impossibility. That's what they're striving for, is equality of outcome, which is you can't have. I'm 5'7". I can't play in the NBA. I'm also 40 years old. There's just no chance. It's too late. You know what I mean? It's just not going to happen. And I'm okay with that. That's life. I have other skills. I got other talents. I'm good at other things. But in trying to balance those scales, that's kind of what they've tried to do with society. And it's kind of a lose-lose, right? Because you end up getting into this place where society's less efficient. Again, if it's not a meritocracy, you're not getting the best results in any particular arena whatsoever. But you also have a lot of resentment that builds in society. I think that, again, we could have improved our equality of opportunity for sure. I think that's going to always be a challenge no matter what. But society was in a much better place in like the late 90s and early 2000s with respect to a lot of this stuff, with racism, with homophobia, with a lot of these things. We were pretty well balanced. But you implement these tools and you actually create the opposite effect. Now you're seeing people that have resentment. So you're actually creating more racist issues. You're creating more issues with anybody that's kind of on the DEI scale, and they're getting all these things and not operating as well for the people that probably deserve them more, right? So you're actually dividing society in a very, very significant way. So yes, that's kind of what's happening. And unfortunately, it's all pretty negative.
Well, it's crazy to think, what did they think was going to happen? Again, I believe a lot of these people are completely delusional, but you start dividing society up into subgroups and then saying certain subgroups get these opportunities because of whatever historical injustice you can come up with. And we're going to take taxes, like even in our tax reports, they track how much they close. They call it the tax gap. Like, how much can we close the income between, say, Aboriginal people and white people, or marginalized or racial groups towards white people as well. And so it's like, what did you think was going to happen when you started doing this? Of course, everything was going to start becoming more conflict.
Yes.
I always try to just bring things down to a individual level, because that's where things start to make a lot more sense. And if it can scale across different levels of society, then it's probably pretty true. And it's like, imagine if you've got a couple kids in the house and you're constantly taking things from two kids and giving it to the one, and you go, yeah, of course those two kids are going to grow to have resentment for that one kid.
Yes.
And that one kid's going to start acting like a spoiled little brat.
Yes.
And that's exactly what's happened across society. But to your point about how things have become less efficient as well, I actually thought this was really interesting in this essay. I do highly recommend people go read the whole essay, because it is fantastic. It's called The Great Feminization by Helen Andrews. But one point she made about in there too is the difference between masculine and feminine psychology when it comes to completing tasks. So male tend to go, how do we complete the task? And that becomes the marker for success, is whether the task gets completed and how well it does. A female ethos worries about having everybody involved in the task, making sure, hey, does everybody have a equal say here in what's going on and how we approach this task and how it gets done, and what are we working towards? And then you
Sounds
get to this
bureaucratic.
Right. And you get to this point where, or at least the DEI bureaucracy for sure, but this is where you get to this point where you're just constantly worrying about representation within these institutions, but not whether these institutions are actually fulfilling their roles.
Right.
And so we're definitely seeing that on a large scale. And again, this is nothing to do with individuals, but group behavior is very real. And when it comes to a feminine ethos as well, actually, even going back to the friend enemy distinction as well, and why I think this has become so large is because men typically go, okay, there can be a predator out there, but I'm willing to work. Like, for instance, if I do a business deal with somebody, I might understand that this person is a snake, but I'm willing to cooperate on our mutually aligned incentives. And then I'm going to keep an eye out and also have in the back of my head that if things go too far, we'll go into conflict. And there's the kind of that underlying idea beneath all male dynamics is, hey, you push far enough, like we're fighting.
Yeah.
When it comes to the female ethos, there's no ability to cooperate with somebody that you might not be actually completely aligned with. Even if you look at this all across the animal kingdom, I'm not even saying this is just a human thing as well. You look at it, you go, okay, in a feminine ethos, there's mom, pups, people to be taken care of, and then predators. That's it. Those are the only distinctions. And you see this, you go, okay, we've got the moms, the woke crowd that want to take care of these people that they assume need their help, whether all these marginalized communities and groups, and then there's predators to those groups.
Yes.
That's their entire worldview. And so it is just friends and enemies. And so I think that's why that largely took off as well, is because, yeah, again, this isn't anything to do with any individual women or women themselves. It's more about feminine in the psychology, because I mean, hell, there's women that are more masculine than some men, and men that 100%. Are more feminine than some women. So it's like, it's not, this isn't a cut and dry thing. But when it comes to those values and that psychology, that's definitely a real thing.
Yeah, I mean, one other thing that I would add, and kind of going back to an earlier conversation as well, is when you get people to operate within this space, what happens is, again, people become over-identified with these different components of society and where they fit in, and over-identified with these things that put them in categories. And then what they do with those is they make that who they are, right? So I think it's dangerous to over-identify with anything, even if you're a doctor and you consider that to be the most important thing. Well, you're limiting your capacity to have more or be more. You shouldn't over-identify with anything that defines you, essentially. So that's actually like a rule that I made for myself a long time ago. I think that's a very important thing. But in society, if they keep doing this, well, now you listen to some, and I'm not trying to pick on them, but you listen to some liberal on a social channel, and it's some video, and they give you the list of what they are. Like there's 12 different things, and you're like, okay, like I don't even know what to call this person. They've got all these mental issues that they want to express to everybody, and they're all covered in blue hair and all these piercings and whatever. Okay, cool. But you see, when you do that to yourself, how do you ever shake free from those shackles? The answer is you really can't. You're so emotionally connected and emotionally tied into this stuff that you're willing to defend it to the death because it's your entire identity. Mm-hmm. And that's what I'm saying here is, when you create these categories and you do this within society, you create an army of people that are over-identified with all these these micro categories that you've put them in. That's how they define themselves. Then there goes logic, back into emotion. They'll fight it to the death, friend-enemy situation all over again.
Yeah, once people get subsumed by collective identities, whether that's race, whether that's gender, whether it's whatever, once you get subsumed by that, you do stop being an individual in a large sense, because now you are just actually essentially a reflection of this collective identity. And now there's a lot of people throughout history, like say Herbert Marcuse, who is a Marxist theorist, that would say that we're all just that. But I do think you can actually cultivate a sense of individuality within those collective identities that try to get thrusted upon you, but you can resist that in a very big way. Actually, even just to the identity conversation in general, It's very interesting to think about. Like, many people think, okay, well, I identify as, like, I'm going to claim who I am and then I'm going to enforce it on the world.
Yes.
And like the word identity itself stems from two Latin words, identitum and essentias, which is repeated and being. So like your identity is literally just who you act out on a repeated basis.
Yes.
And so it's just, don't over identify with, oh, I'm this title or I'm this race or anything. It's just like, you are the culmination of all of your actions. But people don't want that one because that's a lot harder to do. That's a lot harder to build than be able to just say, I am this.
Yes, it's your actions or more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But all right, anything else you wanted to add today?
No, that is everything.
All right, before we get out of here, don't forget to head over to our Substack where you can sign up for our newsletter, which goes out 5 days a week. That's blendrnews.com, BLENDR news.com. We thank you for watching, and we'll catch you next time.
Bye, everybody.